Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Caroline Garnett McGraw with The Clearing, and we are a non 12-step dual diagnosis residential addiction treatment center. And what that translates to, in real terms, is that we help people to heal the traumas and the mental and emotional health issues that are holding them back. I see that my video is stopping. Not good. Okay, we're gonna start this from the top, and I hope that the video will hang with us. So sorry about the tricky connection here. So once again, I'm Caroline Garnett McGraw with The Clearing, and we help people to heal the mental and emotional health issues that are holding them back. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about the question of, is it really possible to heal from childhood trauma? And the short answer is yes, it really is possible. And that is good news for everyone who has struggled and suffered when they were young and they didn't have the resources that they have now. However, I do want to dispel a myth here right from the get-go. So time alone does not heal trauma. Just giving yourself time does help the shock to wear off, and it does give you some distance from the mental and emotional pain, but actual healing does not happen unless you actively learn to apply love to the parts of yourselves that were hurt by that trauma. So first, let's back up a bit and talk about what is childhood trauma and how do you know if it's holding you back? So the first most important thing to know is that the definition of trauma is entirely subjective. Psychological trauma is anything that was shocking and upsetting to you personally. So that means it's different for your brother, it's different for your sister, it's different for your parents. It's all about what was shocking to you personally. We recently published several posts on our blog about adverse childhood experiences, and I will talk you through some of the events that tend to precipitate trauma, but again, they're not the same for everyone. So some of those events include abuse of any kind, physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, certainly. And they also include neglect. We don't often think of neglect as traumatic, but the absence of someone, the loss, be it through death or abandonment, that can be very traumatic. Divorce, separation of one's parents can be traumatic. Injury, illness, having a family member who struggles with addiction or another serious mental health concern, having a family member go to prison, all of these can be traumatic for young children. And the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, which was first conducted several decades ago with Kaiser Permanente, it found that there were a lot of negative health outcomes in adulthood that were associated with trauma in childhood. And so that could be really depressing if you've had childhood trauma. You might be thinking, well, does this mean that I'll always have higher risk of a heart attack, for example? And the idea is that if you don't address that trauma, then you will have that higher risk. But if you're able to address it and then work to heal it, then you can significantly lower your risk of these negative health outcomes that are associated with trauma. So, and again, I want to back up and say that trauma in adulthood is also serious, but the impact is different when we're children because we're in a different stage developmentally, and the impact on our psyche when we're children can be very significant based on what developmental stage that we're in. So today I want to go through very briefly some of the developmental stages and share how they impact your life if you've had trauma at that stage. So the idea here is that certain mental and emotional wounds at certain stages of life impact particular aspects of our psychological growth and development. And this theory of psychosocial development was developed by psychologist Erik Erikson. And he talks about this idea that when we're very small, the first stage is age 0 to 3, we're learning about trust. And on a very fundamental level, our life experience during this time shapes whether or not we're able to trust other people in the world. The things we worry about when we're ages 0 to 3, getting fed, eating, sleeping, being comforted, being held. And if we experience abuse, neglect, abandonment during that stage, it can be very hard for us later to trust that other people will be there for us to meet our most basic needs. Next, when we're toddlers, that's ages 3 through 5, we learn about initiative. This is a stage where we start walking, climbing, playing separate from our parents. We start to individuate. And if we have trauma here in this stage of life, it can be very difficult for us to motivate and take the initiative ourselves in our future. So if we're shamed, for example, when we try and create our own life or our own activity, then we can really struggle with motivation and that initiative in our future. And lastly, from ages 5 to 11 is when we develop our self-esteem. This is the time when we develop this fundamental trust in ourselves and our abilities, just a general feeling of feeling good about ourselves in comparison to others, an ability to walk through the world and think, I'm just as good as everybody else. And if we have trauma here at this stage, at the self-esteem stage, we tend to walk around feeling very inferior, and we perceive ourselves to be lower than other people. And we find our worth through others, and we tend toward people pleasing because, again, we feel inferior because this self-esteem stage has not been completed and we've had this trauma that interrupted our development. So there are more developmental stages. They go all the way through the end of life, actually. But those three, trust, initiative, and self-esteem, are the first three that we learn in childhood. And the important thing to recognize here is that when we have a trauma at one of those stages, be it the loss of someone we love, divorce of our parents, any kind of abuse, then it interrupts our natural learning process. It interrupts the lessons that we as humans need to learn at that stage. And that can be very frustrating because we think, oh no, well, I had my chance and I had a trauma and I didn't completely learn how to have self-esteem. So now does that mean I'll never have it? What does that mean for me? The good news is that it is not over just because you had a trauma during that stage in your childhood. As an adult, you can actually learn the skills to reparent that younger part of yourself that had their developmental stage interrupted by trauma. We can take responsibility, we can hold those younger parts of ourselves and learn how to heal them. So what we now know in the latest research and brain science is that neuroplasticity is real, that we can change our thoughts and our feelings, we can create new neural pathways, and by thinking certain thoughts, we increase the amount of myelin on our nerve cells, so it's called myelination. And essentially, we can build stronger neural pathways to positive, caring, and self-supporting thoughts. So we can physically change the structures of our brain in adulthood by learning to take care of those younger parts of ourselves that went through trauma. And that is really exciting. So we know that when we have unresolved trauma, it's also worth noting that we tend to try and unconsciously recreate the situations in which we suffered that trauma because there's a part of us that really wants to resolve it. We want to heal it. And we can break this cycle when we learn to apply love to those parts of ourselves that hurt. Because if we don't know how to do that, then we just keep setting ourselves up to experience that same abandonment, that same abuse, that same trauma that we had when we were children. But again, we break the cycle when we learn the skills and the tools to take care of ourselves and to reparent ourselves and take care of those children that we were. Because in a very real way, we are all the ages we've ever been. Yes, I'm 33 years old, but there's a sense in which I am also 5-year-old me, and I'm also 10-year-old me. And I'm the one who holds all of those past versions of myself. And I'm the one who can tend to them and take care of them and give them the love and the support that they really need to move forward. So I hope that is helpful. I'm going to just check over to the comments before we sign off. Seeing lots of hearts and lots of love. Thank you all for watching. I do apologize. My video has been lagging. I hope it hasn't been lagging on your end, but we're doing the best we can with the technology that we've got. So Just as we close, if you or someone you love is struggling with severe depression, anxiety, trauma, and addiction issues, if that's taking over your life, we can help. Give us a call at 425 275 8600 for a free confidential conversation about your situation. Once again, that number is 425 275 8600. I'll also post some links to blog posts that I mentioned about adverse childhood experiences, childhood trauma and addiction, some other resources to get you connected. Oh, Tony, I see you said that is very true. Yes, it can be really healing to understand, it's not that there was anything wrong with me. It's that I went through a trauma at a developmental stage and that changed my life. And it can give you the ability to take your power back and say, you know what? I'm going to give myself now what I needed back then. It can be very empowering. So thank you all for watching and for listening. I will pop those links in the comments. And until next time, signing off.